is a special meeting tonight of the North College Park Community Association and the West College Park Civic Association. I'm joined here this evening with Suchitra Balachandran, who's the president of the West College Park Citizens Association, and I am John Krause, the president of the North College Park Citizens Community Association, formerly Citizens Association. And on the agenda this evening is a discussion, open forum, town hall meeting about the subjects of transparency in government, the Maryland Open Meetings Act, which has some relevance, I understand, to our city charter.
Correct.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, John. I hope you don't mind if I stand. I was a teacher for a long time, and I just feel weird sitting. I'm Mary Cook. If you don't know me, I'm currently a board member for NCPCA. Most of you probably know me, and you're members of NCPCA as it is. You know, tonight we're here for several reasons, and you know, they include our concern for the number of closed meetings that the city has been having, and that was, I have to admit, it was during my term as a council member as well. However, I have to say that, you know, it's not that I wanted all those closed meetings, but, you know, that is how, you know, the mayor and other members of the council wanted to proceed. And so we're talking about the closed meetings tonight and the legality. We'll dive into that a little bit. We're going to talk about Open Meetings Act violations by the mayor and council. We'll talk about the lack of transparency and the refusal of a request to release the October 3rd memo. You might have heard of that before. That memo was done by an outside attorney that we had hired as an advisor to give us some information following what I termed the debacle after the non-citizens voting vote. So, as you can see by tonight's agenda, we'll be hitting some highlights here. And let me just start this off by saying, how did we get here today? Just very briefly, I mentioned the vote prior to this. It even started before that. There was a point where we decided, as a council, to look at our charter. They wanted to do, and I say they, our city attorney, some council members and the mayor wanted to do a brief look at the charter, change some wording maybe, change some periods, some administrative things. Well, when they came back to us, there was one substantive change. It was pretty interesting, and that was that if we were to release this city manager, it would take 6 votes. Well, that got me to thinking, and I said, well, if it takes 6 managers to release the city manager, it should take 6 votes for us to pass the charter amendment. And lo and behold, my fellow council members actually agreed, and they went along with that. So we changed to 6 votes for a supermajority for each change in the charter. Well, lo and behold, we didn't know that that wasn't the thing to do, that it was actually against Maryland law. Unfortunately, we didn't get good advice from our attorney, and we later paid for that. And I think you all know, I won't go through that whole thing about the vote and the apologies that we had to make, okay? Since then, the council has changed the supermajority back to a simple majority. So any, charter change will only take 5 votes, okay? As it should be according to Maryland law, okay? So now we're at the point that we have asked, as an NCPCA has asked, as of February, we sent a letter to the mayor and council asking 3 things. One of them was to release the October 3rd memo so that all of you could read it. I mean, I've seen it. I know what it says, and it directly contradicts what you're hearing. The second thing was, let's postpone further charter amendments until we receive an opinion from the Office of the Attorney General. We had asked for an opinion about the term legislative body from the Office of the Attorney General, the OAG's office. we have yet to get that back. It does take time, okay? And the third thing that we asked for was a request for a non-binding referendum on upcoming charters, so that in order to give you the opportunity to speak, to let your voices be heard. We did get a response back, according to Mr. Krause, and we were denied all those things. West College Park Civic Association did a similar thing. They sent a very similar letter to ours. They also received a similar reply. So here we are tonight. We haven't seen the memo. Well, you haven't seen the memo. I've seen the memo. And you have to ask yourself, why are they keeping it secret? Why are they claiming attorney-client privilege? Especially, you know, when they will not let you, the taxpayers, you know, in on their little secret. So anyway, so why is it important to have access to the memo? That's because if we don't have access to the memo, how can you participate in government? How can you fully participate? Well, you can't. So this evening, we're going to review, as John said earlier, the Open Meetings Act, the filing of a complaint that Councilmember Mitchell, Ms. Balachandran, and I sent to the Open Meetings Complaint Board. And we'll also talk about the need for transparency in government, and that'll be covered by Mr. DeGennaro. And finally, we're going to allow you to ask questions after each one of us presents, if that's agreeable to you. Okay? And tonight we have as our moderator, Lynn Sport, who is a member of Resist, Laurel Resist, and she'll just, you know, I'm sure you're not going to get rowdy and out of hand, but I've asked her to serve as our moderator tonight, and just to keep us on point. Okay. So that's how we got to where we are today, and Suchitra is now going to explain to you about the Open Meetings Act if you don't know exactly what that means.
So thanks everyone for coming here. I sort of wanted to start by saying that democracy is not a spectator sport. Okay, if we want democracy, it's up to us to ensure that democracy happens. I mean, going to the election once to the election booth once in 2 years or once in 4 years for whatever race and casting a vote and coming back home is not sufficient. So I'm going to give everybody a homework to do. Please, everybody in this room, go and get certified for the Open Meetings training. And the way you do that is you go online, you search for Open Meetings Maryland, and you'll find a link to the website of the University of Maryland where you can do an online training. It says it takes 2.5 hours, it doesn't take 2.5 hours.
No.
So you've done that.
Very straightforward.
It is very straightforward, it's very logical, but it's got some interesting, you know, preambles that if you think about it, it really gets you, you know, I mean, it sets you down the path of thinking, where are we and where should we be? So I wanted to read a couple of things out right from the beginning. So one is, this is from the Maryland Court of Appeals, and you know, it starts off, I mean, the quote will come later, but the training itself starts off by saying, while the Act does not afford the public any right to participate in the meeting, it does assure the public the right to observe the deliberative process and the making of decisions by the public body at open meetings. And this is what the Maryland Court of Appeals said. It is therefore the deliberative and decision-making process in its entirety which must be conducted in meetings open to the public, since every step of the process, including the final decision itself, constitutes the consideration or transaction of public business. Okay, so this is from the Maryland Court of Appeals. The Maryland Court of Appeals also quoted what the Florida Supreme Court said, and this is what they quoted. They said, one purpose of the government in the Sunshine Law was to prevent at non-public meetings the crystallization of secret decisions to a point just short of ceremonial acceptance. So don't do your discussions behind closed doors and come back and say, we're going to vote in public. Do all of the deliberations out in public. And it says, rarely could there be any purpose to a non-public pre-meeting conference except to conduct some part of the decisional process behind closed doors. right? So why are you going behind closed doors is the question you have to ask and answer very clearly and very publicly to convince everybody that you're going there for some particular reason that's allowed. It says the statute should be construed so as to frustrate all evasive devices. Okay, and that's the purpose of the Maryland Open Government Act. So, as I said, go and do the training because really we should all be informed on what the Open Meetings Act is. And what I want to do is just very briefly, there's also a manual. It's called the Open Meetings Act Manual, which you can download from the Office of the Attorney General. So get that, it's about 75 pages. Start browsing through it in your spare time. It's interesting. It's got opinions attached to it, which, the law is stated, but also beyond that, there are opinions. So there is, a what happens if this, and then there's the opinion by the Open Meetings Compliance Board. This is how this would be viewed. So, and the piece I wanted to really talk about, you can read about all of it, like whom it applies to, why it applies, etc. But the piece I wanted to talk about is closed meetings. Why should a governing body go into closed meetings? And there's 14 exceptions, right, that the Maryland Open Meetings Act lays out. 14 reasons you can go behind closed. And each of those is, so for instance, you want to discuss a annual review of a staff member, right? Say the city manager's annual review. You can go behind closed doors and discuss that because it's a personnel matter, privacy for that one person. But you can't go broadly behind closed doors and say, we want to discuss pay structures in the city of College Park, right? So there is a difference between policy and personnel. And particularly, there is the exception that you go for legal advice. And that's the exception that the city of College Park has used repeatedly to go into closed session to say, we're going to seek legal advice. And the legal advice exception is very, very narrow. It says you can go into closed session to ask a question of your attorney, and that attorney can reply back to the council members, but there can be no discussion among council members. Both Mary and Denise and I spent a bit of time talking to someone who is an expert on Maryland Open Meetings Act, who worked for a newspaper in Kent County and now lives in Delaware and has filed numerous open meetings complaints and violations to the compliance board. And this is an example that he gave us. There was a city that went into closed session under this legal advice exception, had a back and forth with the attorney, asked the attorney questions, the attorney asked, responded, maybe somebody else picked up on that, asked another question and so on. And at the end of that discussion, the mayor said, so is everybody okay, can we go out and vote? And that's illegal. Okay, so making that comment to your colleagues is illegal. So I know Mary's going to talk about the complaint itself that we had against the city of College Park. So it really is knowing what can be done behind closed doors. Saying we are going behind closed doors with an attorney is not sufficient, right? Somebody has to know exactly why, and the Act says the more precise you are about why you are going behind closed doors, the better. So if you're saying we're going to discuss a personnel matter, that's opaque. If you're saying, as I said, we're going to do the annual review of the city manager, that's more transparent. It is a personnel matter, it is allowed, the exception is allowed, but you are required, it advocates very strongly that you're as transparent as possible in your closing statement before you go behind closed doors, right? So and then when you come out, you have in your minutes to say what you did within, however broadly you say, you categorize that, but the emphasis is for the governing body to be as open and as transparent as possible. So I think that sort of covers the basis of the open meetings as far as our complaint goes, but there is a lot more to it. There are 14 exceptions. We should really know. We should really know what this is about and how it works so we can be informed. So I think that's...
Okay, so as my first act as moderator, does anyone have any questions specific to open meetings before we move on to the next part of the agenda?
Does the law pertain at all to electronic meetings online between people, whether typing or some kind of face-to-face communication?
So I asked that question of the person who knows the open meetings really well, and he said that unfortunately Maryland law does not deal with emails. So at this point, I mean, it should be there, it really should, because it is, you're forming a quorum, right? So this is how he put it. Suppose within a 15-minute span, right, emails shoot back and forth between council members, and some result happens as a result of that. Could be construed as a meeting, but you would have to issue a public information act request to get those emails and actually track it and make it happen. But suppose somebody says something and then the next day somebody says something else, and that's not really considered as and that was his opinion. Again, I think these are really interesting questions, and I'm not claiming to be very informed on this beyond having done the training and looked at the stuff and helped with the complaint. But there are probably rulings on these issues that we could go and look into and really understand.
I will have to say, I've looked at the manual, and it's not that hard to read. A lot of times if you look at our charter and try to figure out reading that, I found that difficult to read. But the at least I looked at the closed session section, and I did want to let people know, don't get scared off just because it's a law or something like that. It's got all the legal gobbledygook in it. It doesn't, it reads fairly straightforward. Yes, there are some things that might be a little hard to understand, but for the most part, it's pretty straightforward.
Anything else? Okay, let's move on.
There you go. Okay.
Back to you, Mary.
Yay. So what I'm going to talk about now is the complaint that Councilmember Mitchell and Suchitra Balachandran here and I sent to the Open Meetings Complaint Board. We did that because it's very obvious that we've been going into closed session too many times. And it became more and more apparent that we weren't doing it properly. When we're required as a body to state a reason, as Suchitra already explained, and I won't go through that again, but we're not doing it correctly. And so what we did is we took the minutes. I wouldn't normally explain all this, but since we're a small group, we took the minutes that we had available to us, and we figured out that, at least 6 times the city has gone into closed session to talk about the charter, and they've done it in such a way that it's not obvious what they're talking about. You might have noticed that we really haven't talked about the charter maybe once or twice in open session. And we had a public hearing when we originally were talking about the supermajority. But that is, like I said, we've already changed that back to a simple majority. We will have another public hearing next week when we can talk about now what is called 18-CR-02, which talks about some of the other changes that the mayor and council want to make to the charter. And those we're not going to delve into tonight. If you have any questions, we might be able to answer some of them, but we didn't think that was what we wanted to cover tonight because it is so complicated. So, as far as the complaint goes, where am I? We are alleging that the mayor and council have, sought legal advice so many times, but they have not done it, as I said, in a proper way. Because if you're inside the closed session, which I have been in some of them, and Councilmember Mitchell has been in others, it's obvious that we go beyond the scope of what we should be doing, as Suchitra pointed out. And again, I'll repeat what she said, that we can ask questions of the attorney, but after that, we have to stop. And it used to be that we would ask, occasionally we would be in the middle of a discussion in an open session, Mr. Krause will remember that, And then suddenly, you know, we had a question of the attorney. So we would stop what we were doing, we'd go into closed session, we'd go in the back hallway, and we'd have a little discussion. As soon as we finished, you know, asking our questions, we came back out, we went back into open session. That's not what happens today. Instead, it has become almost automatic that they're going to go into some type of closed discussion. Yesterday, what happened then is we filed the complaint after doing our research, and, well, I guess it was the day before yesterday, we filed our complaint, and it was an immediate turnaround. The Open Meetings Complaint Board forwarded their complaint to Mayor Woyan and the attorney Sue Ellen Ferguson already. So they've already got that in their hands. And now the mayor and council has 30 days to respond to the allegations. And then after that, the OMCB, as it's called, the board, will rule after, upon their response. And assuming that they get it to them in 30 days, there won't be any issue about that. So given our allegations, we are asking that the mayor and council not move forward and have the public hearing next Tuesday, April 24th. And what would probably happen, as is our habit as a council, a vote immediately afterwards. Probably a more suitable thing to do in these cases after a public hearing is to wait a week or wait 2 weeks until another council session. However, our council has not chosen to do that, and they often have a vote immediately after a public hearing. So there's no time to digest things, think about it, talk about it. We are also asking that the mayor and council respond to the OMCB board and await their ruling before passing any charter amendments. So as I said, don't take the vote right away, because we honestly believe that these were drafted illegally. The discussions were had illegally. And so that is, of course, going to be a problem down the line if we're proven correct. And you're more than aware, I'm sure, that there's no hurry to pass these charter amendments. They're not on any burning issue. So we can take our time, and I asked for that before, that we take our time, not make any more missteps as we have done in the past. But to this day, the mayor and council don't seem to think that that's the way to go. And finally, if the board, the OMCB board, rules that the city has violated the Open Meeting Act, all the closed meetings will be considered illegal, and the minutes and discussions must be opened up to the public. So at that point, we'll be able to see the memo and any other minutes that the clerk has kept. And at a minimum, we're also asking that, there be some town hall meetings where residents can question the council, the mayor and council, and on their practice of having closed meetings, and have an opportunity to discuss with their elected officials why they continue to go into closed sessions. So I'm going to end it there and hand it back to our moderator.
Questions about the complaint? Yes.
I have a question. Say they have their public session next Tuesday.
Yeah.
They vote right away after it saying, and it votes says a positive, yes, it goes in. That's a charter amendment.
Mm-hmm.
If the Open Meetings Board comes back and says, you did it wrong, what happens to what they did? Does it still go in as a charter amendment, or does everything get invalidated, back out, that type of thing?
So I don't think the Open Meetings Compliance Board has any authority other than saying it is right, whether the meetings were right or not. So that's the only authority that they have. So I suspect nothing will happen at the charter.
So what are there any other options?
I would say it's our voice, basically our voice to articulate this to the council and to say, why are you doing this, is really what we have at the moment.
But again, given that it was done illegally, we should have some option to back out whatever changes they made based upon the violations that they had of the Open Meetings Act is a law.
Right. So the
Which means
compliance.
they're violating the law, which
Right.
means we should have some options to back out all the actions, not just open up the meeting minutes, find out what's going on, but also say, well, as a result of this illegal action, you changed our charter. That change to the charter should be backed out or considered illegal at the same time.
Right, so I think the Open Meetings Act clearly says you can send a complaint to the compliance board and they will tell you if what the body did was right or not. But if you want further action, you have to sue, which is what they say in their so there has to be a lawsuit in order to do anything further. But yeah.
Yes.
And so who do they say that we sue? We sue the city?
They don't say
Hmm.
whom to sue, right? I mean, it's up to us to figure
But
out.
okay, in other words, for a lawsuit, you need standing.
Right.
Okay, so would we have standing? Would their decision convey standing? Standing is the position of being aggrieved and being able to say, I was, or our group was aggrieved by this, and therefore we can file a lawsuit against.
So I would say I don't think the compliance board decision is needed in order to have a lawsuit. So the question of whether we are standing or not is, I mean, you are a better judge of that from your legal perspective, of whether a citizen in College Park has standing to sue the city on violating the Open Meetings Act. I don't think you have to go to the compliance board for that.
I really don't know the answer to
Right,
that
so
question, and that's what, I mean, we, for any lawsuit, you need to have, basically, standing, and you need to have a specific, like, harm.
Right.
And essentially, when they vote, that's the harm. Okay, so if there was something that they've already voted on that disadvantages a person or a group, that person has standing. I don't know the answer to this because I'm not an expert in this particular area and I've not done legal research specific to it. But it's something we need to explore because it seems to me that there's really only two ways that we stop behavior. And one way is by going through to the board, but if that doesn't actually fix anything, it doesn't have a remedy, then will they be stopped in the future from having further, closed meetings? It's really unclear to me, like, what kind of enforcement mechanism is there. And I'm saying this ignorantly.
Right, so I mean, from what I have seen, there is a requirement in law that there be somebody who has actually gone through the open meeting training. I mean, no body, no elected body can go into closed meeting without having somebody who's done the open meeting training and is actually watching out for all these things. So they're required, for instance, to maintain a record of somebody who's done the open meeting training. So we can go back and ask, we can do a Public Information Act request to say, since 2013, please show us your records of who in the council has taken this training. See, because you can say I'm going in with the attorney. I mean, I think the feeling in the council, and I mean, I know Mary and Denise can, and Fazlul can, can speak to that. The feeling is that the attorney will take care of things. We have an attorney that we are going into closed session. The attorney will tell us if what we're doing is wrong. But from what we've read and heard and so on, I mean, the buck stops with the council. It's the elected body's job to figure out if they have the quorum, if they meet the, and the Open Meetings Act, and they go into closed session and all of those issues, which they may, which in this case we allege at least, and from our understanding it seems fairly clear, when you have, a report from the closed session which says next steps were discussed, and that's in the minutes. Well, next steps should not be discussed behind closed doors. I mean, that itself says that what you've done is illegal. So I think we have now the ammunition to go before the council and say, stop it. And I think that's what we should do, because we should not allow this council to go on Tuesday and have this hearing. So we all need to show up at this hearing and say, stop this hearing until you've responded to the compliance board. And, and the compliance board has ruled. I mean, that's the bare minimum that we should be able to do on Tuesday. I also want to say, if everybody, whoever has signed up there, we'd be glad to email you a copy of the complaint so you have it. I just didn't want to make, paper copies, but.
I think John has something to ask.
I think, well, a lawsuit is one way to solve the issue. But I think obviously you're bringing these things to the council now, and having people speak to these issues at the public hearing next week is really key. You would hope that the mayor and council would hear, at some level, the significance of this in the voices of the people who come to speak, and the voices of the West College Park, North College Park, who asked for a delay on the vote of this charter amendment. I think, though, frankly, other strategies may work better in our advantage. And one of them is that it takes a certain amount of time. I forget what the delay is, whether it's 60 days, 30 days between the time a charter amendment takes effect. And I think during that time, the appropriate action, particularly if the Open Meetings Board rules in favor of your complaint, is to have one or more members of the council request a reconsideration of the charter vote during that time period, before it goes into effect, and to state that the public record should be reopened, okay? And further, if there really is a complaint that succeeds in this manner, then one of the things they should be asking for is to release the minutes of their closed sessions. So these are released to help people who are going to now be considering the charter amendment would have the same advantage as everyone else to understand what was discussed behind closed doors. And you should also perhaps, once again, it depends on the nature of what the Open Meetings Board rules, release the memo of the other attorney's opinion and hold another hearing after whatever delay of time is necessary. Pardon me. And I think actually, in many respects, those would be far preferable outcomes than a lawsuit, because the mayor and council then would be appropriately self-policing on this issue.
Any other comments?
I have another question. We have the memo. What would actually stop us from just reading the memo to the council during a meeting?
Nothing.
Nothing would stop us, I guess.
Time limits.
It is a lengthy memo.
No, but it's actually the first part that's the part that matters.
Yes, I can agree with that.
So I guess the question is, what about that as a strategy?
I think it should be considered.
By who, and who makes that decision?
If it's a lengthy memo, why not get, and the time limit might cause whoever starts reading the memo not to finish it, to have the next person pick up from where they left off, and use their time, et cetera, so that you do get the full memo read within the bounds of the time limits and all.
You promised to bring lots and lots of people so we could get the whole memo read. Or at least some of the important
Well, I'm
parts.
just saying, maybe we could highlight the parts that we want read, and if everybody in this room, or almost everybody in this room, came to that, we should be able to get in with 3 minutes, I think is the limit. You could say a lot of things in 3 minutes.
Oh, yeah, that is a possibility.
You could start a change.org petition now and start circulating it on Nextdoor with the comments that we had, the list of demands, and get that going so people can sign on to it, and that will go to the mayor and council. I mean, there's many ways of exerting public pressure, and which would make it harder and harder for mayor and council to resist, right? It's
Exactly.
right.
I don't know a lot also. Sometimes the record of change, I think, is important. I think, when I was on the city council, we would also have some closed meetings for these reasons as well. And Jack Perry, who was on the council at the time, would almost always object. And very seldom did it occur that a motion to not go into executive session passed. But I do wonder if you were to ask the city clerk to give you the number of instances over the past 10 years that the city council has gone into executive session, I wonder if there has been a trend, an upward trend, of the number of times they've gone into executive session. Because I suspect there has been an upward trend over the past many years. And I think that also sort of goes to a little bit of the intent thing.
So to get back to your point, John, every time even one member of the council objects, there has to be a document submitted to the Open Meetings Compliance Board.
Really?
Every time somebody, unless it's unanimous.
Maybe that's
So
what
then
that
going
is.
back to the Open Meetings Compliance Board and saying, what is your record? Has the city been complying with that? Or maybe ask the city, have you been complying with sending in your documents to the Open Meetings Compliance Board? For instance, at the last meeting, I think both Fazlul and Denise voted no to going into closed session. Because again, the immediate reaction when the council got the complaint was to go into closed session. I mean, it is kind of ironic that the complaint is you're going into closed session, and they said, we're going into closed session to get legal advice. Which is, I mean, they
It
just.
is ironic, but on the other hand, that they actually are at that point probably seeking legal advice.
But again, you have to ask the question, but did it stop at legal advice or was there discussion?
Well, actually, when you're talking about litigation, that I think is a legitimate use of, whereas the whole proposal to amend the charter, that is not a legitimate legal discussion. I mean, that's completely separate. I mean, arguably, everything that the council does is a legal discussion, right? Because they're making laws. So discussing amendment of the charter in closed session is completely different than discussing litigation that is either ongoing or, in.
So litigation has a separate exception. Of the 14, litigation is one of them. Acquiring property for the public entity is also an exception because you don't want to be discussing in public how much you may pay and then somebody else may pay more. So it's supposed to be a taxpayer protection that you go into discussing, but not to discuss public property. So for instance, a discussion on Calvert property, when you discuss that to say, what should we do, that's not allowed. You can't go into closed session to discuss what should we do with the Calvert property. So the more you read into it, the more you realize we might have further. We did want to concentrate on the charter because that was really imminent and it had a definite frame from October to March that we looked at all the minutes and the agendas and all of that. There was a time when an entire agenda, open agenda item on the charter was moved to closed session. It was there in open session and they said, let's take this, John Rigg, I think, said, let's take this to closed session. Everybody said yes and it went into closed session. We don't know what happened there. But we do know that, there is something we have found in the minutes where there was apparently a straw vote taken in closed session. Because Monroe Dennis refers to that in the open minutes to say a straw vote was taken. There is no straw vote that shows up in the open minutes anywhere else. It must have happened in closed session. So it's these things that lead us to believe that the conduct was really egregious. And the idea, as we say in our letter, the council was embarrassed by what happened. But embarrassment is not 14 exceptions to go to closed session.
Why don't we move on to what Raphael has to add, and then we can come back to this discussion.
My name is Raphael DeGennaro. I'm a resident of North College Park. I was asked to speak about the benefits of transparency for the city, especially in regard to the charter. I started with there's a document on the city website, which is a great one-pager, and it has the city vision, mission, goals, and values, all, really concise. And if you read the city mission, it says the City of College Park provides open and effective governance and excellent services that enhance the quality of life in our community. So open government is right there in about the first 7 words of the city mission. If you go down to the values, what is the number 1 value stated? Open and effective government. The city conducts its business in a lawful, open, and democratic manner. The city values communication and public discussion on issues affecting the city. So we're not making this up. This is, and by the way, this was adopted on August 11th, 2015. I would guess that many of our elected officials voted for this. So this is supposed to be what we're about. The question is, what happens when we don't have open government? I think there was a great example last year during the big controversy over a charter amendment that occurred last year, and the substance of it doesn't matter at this point. The chief sponsor of that amendment, District 1 council member, who's actually no longer on the council, she was on the WAMU radio show discussing the issue. And she said her greatest regret about the debate was that the process hadn't been done in a good way. And it left people feeling surprised, upset, confused, and mistrustful. Those 4 words are mine. But her concern was this process had left the whole city, all of us, in a place that was harming us, was preventing us from really interacting with each other, and was causing a lot of people to have suspicions and worries that may not even have been justified, but they just felt bushwhacked and surprised. The other thing that happened last year was a number of us asked for a non-binding advisory referendum on the charter amendment, just like the people of Tacoma Park had had. And we don't think they're any better than us. And we were told, in effect, you can't handle it. This isn't really for you. They kind of patted us on the head and they said, we understand why you want that, but we don't think you can handle this. And then what came out was that, in part because of closed government, in part because of rushing, not doing things openly, serious legal mistakes were made. There were 2 mistakes, oops number 1, oops number 2. And it was just embarrassing, frankly, for everyone in the city. And all of us shared some of the blame. I didn't read the city charter and look things up the way I could have. So it was all of us made a mistake by rushing, by not doing our homework, by not following the process. And again, the result is mistrust. The result is confusion. The result is that we are not able to do what we need to do, which is come together as citizens. This country is tearing itself apart. The only thing that's going to save it is people like this coming together in small groups and towns and beginning to have conversations and sort things out together. And open government is key to that. You know, years ago I was a congressional aide, and I worked for a senior member of the House Armed Services Committee. And I had a security clearance that allowed me to go in the secret room in the Capitol when they were debating the final things, and only special people could go there. And what I realized was the reason for it, they didn't talk about super classified stuff most of the time. It was really to save embarrassment half the time, because they were just awkward subjects, and it was like they didn't want to talk about it, they didn't want the press talking about it. And so, of course there were some legitimate purposes, and sometimes you needed to talk about military secrets or whatever, but a lot of times it really just felt like an exercise to avoid embarrassment or the awkwardness of explaining things to people that were not that easy to explain. So we need to get back to basics. The other thing I think that's useful to remember, and again, we don't want to get into a lot of the substance of charter amendments tonight. We're talking about process. And again, I think also we want to emphasize the people who have what we would say made mistakes. They're not bad people. It's a bad process. And bad process leads to mistrust. And that makes it harder for the government of the city to get anything done. It's not a coincidence that the city mission and city values talk about open and effective government. Open and effective government. Because one of the benefits of open government, it is, over the long term, more effective. You know, the CMA is the world's leading association of professional city and county managers. They have a list of the 10 benefits of open government. I won't read you all the details, but just tell me if these are the kind of things you want from your government and your city. Build trust within your community. Gain new ideas. Increase community engagement. Understand your community's needs better. Empower citizens. Showcase reform. Attract citizens to get involved in government. Foster a local government professionalism. Educate your citizens. This is what we want. Open government is more effective government. Open government can give us these benefits. All of us have to do better. We tonight, however simple and awkward and imperfect, we don't have all the answers, we don't pretend we have all the answers, all of us need to do better. And what we're saying to our elected officials is, let's start over. Let's not continue in the spirit of last year with mistakes and division and secret memos and secret government. Let's turn over a new leaf. Let's start a new era of open government that is also effective. We talk about one college park. We need to come together, citizens and elected officials, and work together on these problems. Thank you.
Any additional comments or questions?
Question. About the time you were formulating your complaint, was there any evidence that the city was engaged in a current lawsuit at that time when you made your complaint regarding the charter or anything related to any of those matters that might have warranted a closed session to consult with the attorney?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
We discussed the Office of the Attorney General being requested a letter. When was that request made?
So that request was made during the session. We actually made two requests. The first request was to ask about the supermajority, and then quickly following on the heels of that, we asked them to clarify the term legislative body, because the way state law is phrased on charter amendments, there's 2 places where legislative body is used, and then 1 place where it says as it's customarily done, and our customarily done is different from our legislative body. So we ask that question, we ask that as an add-on, and we send it through Delegate Peña-Melnick's office. It's interesting that the first answer came back very quickly, because a supermajority is something they have dealt with for a long time. And the response was, yes, you cannot do a supermajority, you have to go back to a majority. The second answer is taking a while, which makes me think that they're thinking about it. That they didn't have the ready answer to just ship to us saying, we thought about this before and here's the answer. They're also, I thought we might get it once the session is done, but apparently they're busy with bills and bill signings. So we will get it when we get it, but that's pending, and so it's not the city that sent it out. It was, Delegate Peña-Melnick who sent it out. And so if the city sends it out, it takes a long time to get an answer. The protocol is different for the city sending it than for a delegate sending it. So we will get the answer, at some point, but in far shorter order than if the municipality had sent it. So that's out, because we were concerned about, what the memo said, and what is the right answer, what does the state view it as. So that's the answer to that.
Could I add something here? And for those of you who haven't been following this as closely, the reason we're concerned about this term legislative body is because at this current time, the city attorney has said several times that, they're trying to clarify this term for us. Well, if you look at the charter, it's legislative body. Well, let me go back. The real reason that has to be clarified is because they need to find out, or need to state whether or not the mayor is a part of the legislative body. And if you read the charter as it is now, granted it is not very clear as it is now, it never, to me, it never really states that. And I actually, talked to former Mayor Anna Owens about that. And she said, no, she was never part of the legislative body. And, that's one mayor's opinion, but, so this is why we're concerned about this term, and what will that bring down the line? Will that give our current mayor and future mayors more rights to vote? Will it start to change our form of government? And all of this done without any input by the residents? So, this is another concern that we have.
Let's start here, and we'll go behind. Start with you.
Well, I just wanted to clarify that the mayor in the city of College Park has always had the authority to vote and a tie vote. The charter has never given the mayor any other authority. They are using the term legislative body in order to claim that the mayor is a council member. And I mean that because a council member votes on everything. He wants to vote on everything. And so the term legislative body is something that he is trying to use, trying to claim that the mayor has always been able to vote on everything. But as we know, that's never been the case. So one of the reasons why all these discussions about the charter are being held in closed session is because the mayor does not want the people of the city of College Park to know that he is trying to get more power than is currently and has traditionally been in the city charter. You talked about embarrassment. Yes, this is embarrassing. It's politically dynamite. And it is basically, it has no basis in in the charter itself. It is using a term that they discovered could give him power that he does not have. And that's why all these discussions are being made in closed session. If it was truly an honest query, there would be no reason for it to be in closed session. If he really just wanted to know whether the mayor truly does now and ever has been able to be a voter on all the issues, that's something he could have asked in open session. The fact that he has not and does not and will not is because he's already been told that he's wrong. And he doesn't want the city, the people of the city of College Park to know that. So, sorry.
Yeah, coming back.
I'd actually like to ask you a question. Are you an attorney, or do you have a legal training?
I am an attorney, yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
So it seems, well, it's very helpful because it seems like all of this stems from the mayor not releasing the October 3rd outside council memo. And the reasoning he's given is that this could somehow jeopardize the council receiving privileged or non-public advice from attorneys in the future. Is there any scenario where that explanation would hold water?
The city has their own city attorney, and the city attorney, her obligation is to give good legal advice to the mayor and council. She is not supposed to be treating the mayor as her client, but that is essentially what's happening here. She is not treating the entire council as her client. So there's an ethical issue here. Correctly, they requested outside counsel's opinion on an issue of law. The outside counsel provided an answer, and that answer was different than the answer given by the city attorney. And it's a different answer than what the mayor wanted to see. So that is what this is all about. So lawyer-client privilege doesn't make sense in this context. Normally, lawyer-client privilege means that the lawyer is speaking to the client is supposed to be the whole council and the mayor. But what's happened here is that they've changed the definition of a client to making it just the mayor. And this whole issue, it has huge professional responsibility issues. And I'd be disbarred if I did, okay?
We have a question over here, or a comment, I think, right?
Sorry, so let me do the camera thing real quick, because, okay. And last North College Park
Get in
Civic.
front of the camera,
Oh
sir.
my God.
Yes, there you go.
Please come over here.
And the last North College Park Civic Association, Community Association meeting, I did some digging, and so what I found was that the municipalities, I think Maryland has 157 municipalities. Almost in every case that I've looked at so far, almost in every case, the city charter has an explicitly defines the mayor as being part of the council. That allows the mayor to act like a council member and to vote like a council member. Otherwise, when it doesn't have it explicitly said, it says the mayor will be a council member. If it doesn't have it, the mayor cannot, is limited and cannot vote. One of the things that I'm very curious about is whether or not that, speaking to the embarrassment, whether or not that would be and professionalism, whether or not that would be enough to keep that matter behind closed doors and not leaked out. So there's also embarrassment, but there's also in my mind, there's also legal consequences. So if the mayor is not allowed to act like a council member, or even vote to break a tie, there's a president's, out of Aberdeen or Havertgrass, who has a very similar constitution to us. He's not been able to vote. What has happened in the past that would nullify or put us through a lawsuit to be able to address something that had occurred before in the past? I don't know what the answers are, but that's something that I'm very, very curious about. I'd like to see that memo come out, and I'd like to see this another mayor. And so that's what I have to say.
Does anyone have a response to that before we move on to?
Well, it's kind of,
So over here?
You've now become the official legal voice of this meeting.
Unofficial.
I just wanted to say that, okay, all this is about a desire to have a full vote and voice as a council member. The proper way to do that is to actually propose it, discuss it, vote it up or down. And that's what should happen. But actually to do this the way that it's being done, they're trying to pretend like it's already happened. And that is, it obviously hasn't already happened because he's never had this power before. So your information it shows that this kind of government does work in other jurisdictions. So if the city of College Park wanted to adopt it here, we could. And whether or not we want it, I don't know whether I'd like it or not. I have no opinion. So it's not whether or not we have that form of government that's the issue. It's that they want that form of government, but they don't want to have an honest vote.
Yeah.
They don't want to have an honest discussion, because this says that there was disagreement by the lawyers. And yet I'm not hearing admission by the mayor or the city attorney that there was a disagreement. And that I find very frightening.
If I could just say, and this is just the first charter amendment. There are 4 other charter amendments that I've heard about that could be coming eventually. Non-citizen voting, juvenile voting, 16 and 17-year-olds, at-large council members, 4-year terms for council members. Now, some of these things, I have no idea what I think about them, but how are we going to debate these? And the thing with the legislative body, it's complicated, it's difficult to get your mind around, but some of these are big issues that people understand and they're going to want to talk about. So are we setting a precedent that we're going to do some of these other amendments in a similar way, sort of pretending that they shouldn't be discussed, like you say, or are we going to face them and say, this is a big deal, here's why we think we need it, let's have a conversation about it, and then let's make a decision together as a city.
I just wanted to add something to that, there is really the problem in state law that gives the power to amend the charter solely to the municipal body with a simple majority vote. No other foundational document, whether it's the county charter or the state constitution, is treated that cavalierly. So it's sort of incumbent then on the council to take extra precaution, because they're just given, a 5 vote, you can change anything. You can add at-large seats, you can make it 4-year terms, and why not life terms to the council? Let's stretch this to the absurd, and then it goes on to your son when you die. There's many things you can do, which is it's kind of, just to stretch it out. But there are many serious, amendments to the charter that you can do that kind of disenfranchise people at the expense of longevity for the council or whatever else can be done. And that's really, since we don't have the power to change, to stop that, we have to figure out how to make it happen by having members elected to the council who are responsive to these comments from the residents. We currently don't appear to have that.
Have to let John speak because he's been very patient.
It's easy. I was very surprised when I heard about the number of times the council had gone into closed session over discussions of charter amendments. And I, from, my experience with the open meetings law from before, I was very surprised that that would have been allowed because, once again, there was no pending litigation. It's not a matter of negotiation. There's no real estate being purchased. It's not a personnel matter. It's not really, in my opinion, any of those 14 reasons. But once again, this is going back to what Lorene said a while ago. The great remedy of all, if you want transparency, now that they've been keeping minutes of their executive sessions, their closed sessions, releasing what they did discuss now is a huge advantage to people who want to know what really are the issues and who was really advocating for what or how things were voted and all those other things that they didn't want you to see in the first place. So I really do think that hopefully if you prevail in your complaint, getting a copy of those minutes and releasing the memo is all really, really important. And hopefully this will not happen again the next time charter amendments are discussed, because I don't see any substantial reason at all why anything related to our forms of government should be held in closed session. Those should always be open session.
Do you have any comment?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I meant to address, it's interesting that you brought standing. Their discussions, the county council discussions, city council and the mayor's discussions are going closed sessions for, you mentioned privacy as one of those elements. But they're actually talking about the charter. The charter is not something that is a private matter, it's not a legal matter, it's our matter. So when you go behind the closed doors, you start talking about my charter, my government, that's no longer in the purview as far as I'm concerned. It's part of the public record. And that should be known to all of us. And when you talk about standing, that would be my stand. That's what I'm agreeing. I am not privy to the conversation about policy and my government and my charter and my laws that I'm supposed to buy and pay taxes for. And so that gives me plenty of standing. The other thing is grounds. I think the Open Meetings Act would be would constitute, within it would constitute some grounds to be able to sue. Am I going to sue them? No. Would somebody else, down the pike? Yeah, that opens up all of us to having to go through a litigation, pay our taxes to have to defend or to go along with a lawsuit to be able to fix things. So I wanted to let you know what my opinion was on that.
Concerning standing, I think that someone is going to have to do some legal research on it, because it is a matter of a legal issue, and I don't know the answer.
Yes.
Just to clarify to me, and maybe other people, these changes that are being proposed, that they want to have their public hearing next Tuesday, there's no critical reason for rushing to do it. My understanding of getting this outside attorney was to review the charter and make sure, the primary reason was to make sure that we were in compliance with whatever the state of Maryland, and if the county has something, whatever, that we were in compliance. When they proposed the charter amendment several meetings ago, these were included along with fixing that supermajority issue. And at that time, they said, no, we're going to do the supermajority, straighten that out because it is a known issue. Put off the others till later, which that later has happened now. Is that the way I understand it? There's no big rush to define this legislative body right now. We can do it in the fall and still be okay.
Yeah, Carol, you are correct about that. There's nothing that says we need to get it done now. And I just want to say that, when we hired the outside attorney, it was only to for her to look at certain parts of what we call 17-CR01, which was that part about the, you know, the supermajority, as well as a few other items in that particular section. That's it. So we weren't having her look at the whole charter, nor were we having her look at all of 17-CR-01.
Mhm. Any other comments or questions before I think Suchitra's gonna talk about, reiterate the request? Yes, sir.
I have a question, just on the basis of shopping for attorneys to find ways to use as a basis for changing the charter amendments. When this was written down and created in the first place, I'm sure that attorneys looked at it. And how does the mayor or council have the authority to go look for new attorneys to reinterpret the charter?
Would Councilmember Kabir want to address that, or do you want me to do that?
Thank you. So you're asking when he hired the outside attorney, why did he do that? Is that it?
Yes, what's the basis for going and looking for an attorney?
The process for
To
it.
reinterpret what the
Yeah.
charter says.
Yeah. So we found ourselves at fault as a body, which included mayor and council and the attorney. So that actually, that's the reason we went for a second opinion around it.
So when you say you're at fault, you've already conceded that it was improper.
Yeah, so we have been told by the Maryland Municipal League that there has been precedents that suggests there should be supermajority. So that means what we did at the voting of the non-citizen voting was wrong. Which means we had to change the charter back what it used to be, which is simple majority. So before doing that, we decided that we should be asking opinion of ourselves. That's the way I felt.
All right, it was, Maureen, I think I learned your name, then John, then the guy next to you.
Jordan.
Jordan.
So essentially, as Priscilla has said, when the council changed the charter, the lawyer, the city attorney did not look into the law to see whether that was authorized under state law. And because that, basically, they had to undo the vote. And when they realized that they didn't know what state law required, the city council wisely requested input from outside counsel. And I say wisely because the outside counsel has shed light on what our charter says and means, and the city attorney and the mayor are saying that it says something different. Okay, so it's only because we have the outside counsel provide input to the city council members that we discovered that, and I'll give her the benefit of the doubt right now, that the city attorney just made a mistake. But what's problematic is that when the outside attorney says something different, the city attorney is not letting anybody find out what the outside attorney said. And the mayor doesn't want anybody to find out what the outside attorney said. So at the best, we can hope that they're just hiding embarrassment, all right? But if it's worse than that, that's very problematic. And so we're lucky actually that the council did hire outside counsel Otherwise, we would have no idea that the mayor and city attorney and some of the council members are trying to do something that has never been done.
John?
I just wanted to just make sure that I was understanding correctly and everybody understood maybe. When Fazul, you said that the council was at fault, you were referring to the votes related to the supermajority.
Exactly.
Okay, so then we're not talking about fault related to open meetings, we're talking about just the preview. I just wanted to make sure that everybody was understanding that the issue of open meetings was not part of that concern.
Jordan?
So the city actually, if you want to know, the city actually issued a statement October 18, and that statement has a section, one sentence that actually talks about the city hired a outside attorney to get opinion of the changes we made, which was wrong. So this is in public. This is actually a public document.
So the question is,
Jordan. Let's let Jordan speak.
I'm just curious, for someone on the council, how do we hire an outside attorney? Is there a process that we're going through to pick someone that we know isn't going to have a conflict of interest in any kind of cases?
Well, what I recall in this instance, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Kabir, is that there were some suggestions made, because this particular attorney, she specializes, her firm specializes actually in issues dealing with, what would you call it, legislative law?
Municipal law.
Municipal law. So anyway, I think we had some recommendations, and they opted to go with this person. I'm not sure of all the ins and outs of it. I don't know if you know.
Raphael wanted to.
Yeah, and a lot of the conversation's been about the legalities, and that's proper because some important legal issues are being discussed. But I think it also is important to remember that there are a broader and somewhat simpler issues at stake, and that is, how do we amend our charter? As Suchitra's pointed out, it's very easy to amend our charter. It's probably too easy to amend our charter and too hard to amend the U.S. Constitution. But it's very easy to do. It's all you need is 5 votes on any day. And so we need a set of practices and customs that protect the charter. And last year didn't work. The lead sponsor of the biggest, most controversial charter amendment last year said on WAMU her biggest regret was the process by which it was pushed. And now we're doing it again on this legislative body question. And we've got 4 more charter amendments that people have talked about, and that could come up next month or perhaps in the dead of summer. And you know, is this the process that we're going to use for these other amendments also? So as important as the legalities are, I think we need to sort of think as a polity and as a group of citizens, you know, what do we expect when these things are done? I personally, and I'm not speaking for the other people here, think that any charter amendment that is widely controversial or major should be sent to a non-binding advisory citizens referendum that the council and mayor are perfectly legally allowed to ignore, but at least it allows the people to express their views, except in true emergencies, and if something happens, we can accept that. So, I think beyond the legalities, we need to think about what is the process for the next charter amendment and the 3 that are coming after that.
Would you have something?
Well, I wanted to agree with you. I think it is the open, transparent requirement and the whole idea of a referendum. Those 2 things are the checks and balances in our system that we don't have. And other jurisdictions do have them. It's sort of ironic that they're proposing to give the vote to non-citizens and younger people, and, you know, whether or not that is a good idea or not, the whole idea of opening up voting theoretically should be really good. But the ironic thing is that they don't want us to vote on it. So they want to, in theory, have open elections. They want to have as many people theoretically able to vote.
The appearance of.
Yes, but not actual practice of. And that's the problem here, is so that they want to look like we are progressive, but we're not progressive at all. So thank you.
So that might be a good segue to the comments that I think.
So, I mean, I think we have to talk about next steps and what it is we're going to do with it. I know Councilmember Mitchell, for instance, has been suggesting that there be a charter commission review, but I think we need bigger than that. As Raphael said, we need a democracy watchdog in College Park, because, I mean, if everything is going right, we don't have much to do, and that's great. But if things are not going right, then we're there and we're watching. So I'm going to suggest we appoint ourselves as the democracy watchdog group for the city of College Park, because, you know, we've obviously shown interest in this issue and come together on this. So it's not just what happens on Tuesday, but what happens beyond Tuesday. We have people's emails, we can set up a Google group, we can all be talking to each other about what's going on in the city, and I think that will help, you know, at least quickly bring a group together that's concerned about city issues in this fashion. So that's one suggestion that I'm going to throw out. And then, of course, we have to talk about what we want to do before Tuesday, because we should make our thoughts known to the mayor and council as a result of this meeting. So, you know, again, we can sort of start putting together, you know, a document maybe that has our thoughts together and then circulate it among everybody to see if people want to sign on to it, either through a petition or, you know, in some fashion that lets the mayor know that this is legitimate and, you know, gets that information out to them by this weekend or Monday at the latest, so that, you know, we put down the list of things, put a halt to the hearing and all the issues that Mary raised earlier, so we are actually on the record as having made that ask. I think, if there are any other suggestions to add to that, we can start organizing.
I'd just like to make one comment, and that is that I think all of us have tried to focus on process. So, you know, there's other charter amendments, and we may disagree. Frankly, some of them I just have no clue. I'd like to hear some more information, some smart people talk about it, and so on. But I think a lot of what we're talking about here is process, and by Democracy Watchdog, I think we're focused on process, and, you know, people will, you know, and disagree on some of the substance of these things, and that's okay. That's the way the process is supposed to work.
Mary, do you have a comment?
I think Suchitra was going to ask comment about our other request. I think I noted during my talk, which were well, we ideally would not want to have the public hearing this Tuesday night. And certainly if we had the public hearing on Tuesday night, we would not want to have the vote immediately following that.
But I think even the public hearing is problematic because the charter was written behind closed doors, so there has been no open deliberation. You know, and given our complaint, if they have some reason to doubt, I mean, you know, the veracity of our complaint, I mean, there's clear indications that we, as you know in our complaint, we pointed out to minutes versus the closing statement, which says that discussion happened when discussion shouldn't happen. So it seems a very straightforward, at least in our opinion, case. But I think we should ask for a halt to the process rather than.
I don't think that's possible.
Well, you can withdraw the charter, right?
No, what I'm saying is you don't want to have the public hearing.
Right.
And the problem is the public hearing has been scheduled. And there's no official meeting of the mayor and council before that public hearing. So there's no opportunity to stop the public hearing from happening.
Does the public hearing happen at the start of the council session, or can the council?
It's not really a council session, it's a public hearing on that one subject. So I think the hearing is going to be the hearing, and I think your opportunity then is to tell them what you think should be happening next at that hearing.
Okay.
I think the hearing goes on,
Right.
unless I'm mistaken, but I think that would be my read of it.
With 4 council members, ex-council members here, they could probably tell us.
Well, they would have to do something like that. They would literally have to, you know, call an emergency, literally an emergency session of council. You know, probably without the cooperation of all the body.
Right.
Very difficult.
Behind closed doors.
No. But it's very seldom done. I mean, I don't know of any that have ever happened. It's allowed by the charter, but I don't know how it would actually be effective.
Well, I suppose we could figure that out, but I think there would be a lack of cooperation.
I mean, in some ways, the public hearing is an opportunity to talk about it, and, you know, if it's gonna happen, then we should seize the opportunity rather than, you know, maybe see it as an opportunity rather than,
That is true, but maybe we could ask them not to vote immediately afterwards.
Oh, I think you should be asking them not to vote until you get the answer back from the,
Right.
open meetings.
Right, open
Commission.
meetings board.
Anyone want the final word?
Does there have to be a quorum for the vote to happen? I mean, theoretically, if a bunch of council members
Just don't
wanted to
show
not
up.
show up, I mean, I know
Well,
it's happening.
So the public hearing is scheduled, that's a standalone item, and then the regular meeting starts, which requires a quorum. If a quorum is lost at any point during the meeting, like particularly before the potential vote, then the meeting would have to be adjourned. But the public, nobody has to attend the public hearing. I mean, none of the city council, I mean, it could be all vacant up there and then still have the hearing.
Yes, sir.
Last word?
Oh, Jesus, no, I didn't mean the last word. I just wanted to add a question. It's the quorum is a majority of the council members.
I forget what the exact count, but it's the count required to transact business.
No, yeah, so it's 5 people.
Right.
So 5 people have to show up. At least 5 people have to show up. Council members have to show
You said
up
for the
Well-
public hearing?
for a public.
No,
No,
one has to show up for public hearing.
no council member have to
because
show
there's
up.
no official business transacted
So who
at the
runs
public
it?
hearing.
The mayor can run it by himself or with himself
Or
and
the
another
mayor.
council member. We still can proceed with the public hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What? Okay.
It's not public, it's not,
You're transacting a public
no, there's people speaking, but
Right.
transaction.
Not actual official meeting.
the official discussion actually happens later at the regularly scheduled meeting. That's when they're transacting their business.
Okay, so there's Open Meetings Act quorum requirement. So whenever you're transacting public business, you have to have a quorum.
That's part of the charter, yes.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, you get the final word.
Oh,
Because at one point, we actually have to.
How about
Yeah.
Les, did he have his hand up?
Oh, did you? Sorry.
Did you want to say anything, Les? No? Okay.
So if three members of the council up and leave at the end of the public hearing before the actual council meeting starts, then they would put out a quorum to vote.
Yeah, that's
No,
fine.
no, I think that would
Needs
still
four.
be,
Yeah.
That's fine. You need 4.
you need to have 5 in the room.
So how many people have to be there?
4.
Four people have to be.
I think Raphael has that.
you know, and we're figuring it out, and we may not figure out the exact course right now, and others may know the parliamentary things better, but, you know, there's gonna be a public hearing, that's an opportunity for us. The members, we don't really want our council members to walk out. We want them to stay and do their job, you know, and so on. What we want them to do is decline to vote or to vote no. You know, we want our council members who are conscientious and they have an obligation, they've taken on this duty and they have the power to vote no. So I think we should be asking for things that are consistent with the duties and the inclinations of the council members, including the ones who might agree with us on.
Okay, final word.
Okay, but I think that it's not inconsistent with the duties of the council members to either refuse to vote or to basically leave when they've been asked by the people to not vote until after we receive back word from the
Open Meetings
Open
Complaint Board.
Meetings Board. So we're not actually being rogue here. There's actually a proper reason for not voting, because basically much of the discussion about the charter, what they would be voting on, in fact, 99% of it happened in closed meeting. So it would actually be quite proper for them to either vote no, abstain, or to just absent themselves. But the public, we need to tell them why they should do that.
So it's been pretty exciting for me to see democracy in progress. And thank everyone for coming. We do need to leave the room by about 8:45, 8:50, but thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you all.
The sign-up list that was circulated, where is that?
No, we're going to have a public hearing on Tuesday.